Hey, what's going on? This is Amazon Jew coming to you from Wyoming in her war room. Today's date is July 30th or June 30th, 2018. And I'm going to show you guys some videos that I found pretty interesting that to me will put the Democrats in their place and put the Republicans in their place as far as stances on the important issues that we're going through right now. And I hope this makes sense to people because we seem to forget. I mean, every day we're being bombarded with more and more, scandal, intrigue, lies, media, all of that. So I'm putting this together as just kind of a quick reminder of just where we've been, where we're going, and how we continue to fight for our country to be a republic and a constitutional government. The Democrats don't want it that way. The Republicans, 9/10 of them do. We do have some bad guys in there, and I'll do that in my next video, the bad boys of the Republican Party. But today I'm going to do the bad boys of the Democrat Party and how they manipulate people into believing their lies, even though their history proves that they don't follow through on their promises. Now you have to remember, President Trump is keeping up with his promises. He's doing the best he can do, being how he's got so many against him. I mean, you've got secret Democrats in the Republican Party. You got Democrats all together. You know, they hate his guts. Then you got media that wants to bash him at every moment. And then you've got the deep state that's trying hard to cover their ass, while all this is going on. So if they can keep you reeling and reeling, from one subject to another, then they can figure out how to get Obama administration off the hook and Hillary off the hook, and the American people forget about it and go back to the norms. Well, I'm not going to let that happen. And I hope you don't either out there. I hope you do as much work as I can do. I've got a lot of time on my hand, and I've always been a patriot. I started on the local level here in Wyoming, and I fought my local county commissioners, and I won. And so this is why this is vehemently important to me, that, you can in your own area go up against it. If you see something that's wrong and it's being wrong, and that, it's not by, basically your 10 commandments. And if these politicians are pulling anything but being honest and forthright with what they're doing and how they did it and who they did it with, then we need to can their ass. And you can do that on the local level. I've kind of gotten involved in the federal level because I've been a Trump supporter since day one. I knew this is just what the doctor ordered. And the reason I knew that is because he didn't owe anybody any favors. He has his own money. He's been his own man. He didn't have to give up his life to come and be president. He saw our system was so fucked up that it was going to take somebody who didn't give a shit what the other side had to say, that he was going to put the train back on the track. So with this video that I'm doing right now, it's going to be little bits and pieces of things that I want you to think about each time you hear a politician speak, or you're being thrown into another whirlwind of, oh my God, something else has happened. They love to play on your emotion. Okay, this is where you got to be, an analytical thinker. Think in analytical ways. Okay, remove yourself from the situation, whether it be abortion or whether it be, immigration, or whether it be anything. You got to remove yourself from the situation, and then you have to analyze all of the evidence. And I mean all of it. You got to dig for it. You got to look for it. You got to go back for it. And once you do, your eyes will open. I guarantee you. And that's how it started for me. I got tired of being screwed over by corrupt politicians.
About his experience protecting our border. So Mr. Cabrera, a Border Patrol agent, a federal employee that works for us, the taxpayers, He says, "We've had this situation going on for 4 years now, and for some reason we haven't fixed it. I don't think you can necessarily blame it on one administration or the other. It started under one and is continuing under another. It hasn't been fixed, and it needs to be fixed. Right now we have this beacon of, we'll leave the light on for you and let you come illegally into our country." If you've seen some of the stuff we've seen down here, you would understand just how important it is to have a tough stance to divert people from coming here. When you see a 12-year-old girl with a Plan B pill, her parents put her on birth control because they know getting violated is a part of the journey. That's a terrible way to live. When you see a 4-year-old girl traveling completely alone with just her parents' phone number written across her shirt, something needs to be done. We had a 9-year-old boy last year have a heat stroke and die in front of us with no family around. That's because we're allowing people to take advantage of this system. Let's be honest here. If we want this law changed, then that's on Congress. That's on nobody else.
Members of the caucus. My name is Luke Rosiak. I'm an investigative reporter for the Daily Caller News Foundation. I've been an investigative reporter covering problems in the federal government for 10 years. Back in February 2017, I read a mostly unnoticed story in Politico about unnamed House IT staffers being suspected of abusing their positions. I was the first reporter to identify them by name, and when I ran them through public record searches, I found long-running anomalies suggestive of problems more serious in nature than what I first expected. Even then, I thought members would be surprised to find that rogue staffers were doing things without their knowledge and would swiftly condemn them and work with prosecutors. That's not what happened. Since then, I've written 40 stories on the topic. The two core issues here are ones I know are important to members of both parties. The first is cybersecurity. Government agencies, political parties, and private industry have repeatedly seen in recent years the cyber threats we face at the hands of bad actors and the harm that can come from not providing robust defenses and swift responses. The second is oversight of government procurement. Congress is tasked with ensuring that trillions of appropriated dollars are legally and responsibly spent. For well over a year now, House officials have been in possession of documentation showing that the House's own purchase orders for office equipment contain misstatements of the true cost of equipment, seemingly for the purposes of evading congressional rules and scrutiny. Some of this equipment appears to be missing. Similarly, for more than a year now, House officials have been in possession of evidence that House servers were accessed thousands of times without authorization, and large quantities of data were being funneled off the network. The available facts, which I've learned from House officials, government records, including police reports, contemporaneous court filings, and House disbursement records, as well as witness interviews, suggest significant violations of House policies and worse. I've been asked by many people to help them understand the basic facts in this case, and I appreciate the opportunity to put forth this information today. There's been substantial misinformation in the public realm about this matter, both maximizing and minimizing it. As some have been quick to point out, random internet users have speculated wildly. At the same time, some members have claimed this investigation is about nothing more than bank fraud, which is at least as incorrect. This information in both directions has flourished as a result of an extraordinary level of silence from official channels surrounding the falsified billing and cybersecurity breaches on Capitol Hill. There are reasons to suspect that this secrecy is not because vigorous action is being taken behind the scenes. The bank fraud charges two former staffers are currently facing were ancillary to the initial investigation, which included over $100,000 of missing equipment in just one member office. At the time the investigation began, the family was working for 45 members of Congress. This investigation into falsified invoices and missing equipment led to the uncovering of cybersecurity breaches that may be unprecedented in scope on Capitol Hill and could have placed member and constituent data at risk. In addition, there are indications that millions of dollars were paid to what may have been ghost employees. To date, no one has been charged with any of these apparent violations, and there are indications that the cyber breach has not been taken seriously. I also want to briefly note a story I published around noon today I've obtained a Pakistani lawsuit in which Henna Alvi, the wife of Imran Awan, has turned against him and filed fraud charges against him there. So even as people are saying, is this all some kind of partisan thing, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense because these guys were suspected of stealing things from Democrats. There's not really anything partisan about it on the face of it. People are saying, you know, is it partisan? Is it somehow Islamophobia? This is the latest evidence that wherever this guy goes, we see indications of red flags. So again, we have a filing from his own wife accusing him of making violent threats if he doesn't cooperate. And I'll read briefly from a passage. I uploaded those documents today. They were obtained directly from Lahore High Court in Pakistan. So Henna Alvi filed legal papers saying, my husband committed fraud along with the offense of polygamy. Furthermore, the respondent threatened the complainant of dire consequences. He also threatened to harm the lives of family of the complainant if she intervenes. So that brings us up to date on this continuing investigation, which, as you said, Mr. Chairman, it just seems more and more developments all the time. So again, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for this opportunity.
I'd like
and I welcome
to focus my attention on the storage and transfer of data by Mr. Awan and the unattended laptop found by Capitol Police. Here's what we know. The House Office of Inspector General tracked the Awan's network usage and found that a massive amount of data was flowing from the networks. Over 5,700 logins by the 5 Awan associates were discovered on a single server within the House. The server of the Democratic Caucus chairman, then Rep. Xavier Becerra of California, 5,400 appear unauthorized. All right, he is now the Attorney General of California. According to the reports, the Becerra server was actually housing the entirety of a clear violation, the entirety of the servers of all the member offices that employed Imran or his associates, all of it, the entirety. It's a clear violation of House policy. This means that up to 40 or more members of Congress had all of their data moved out of their office server or out of their cloud storage system and onto the Becerra server without their knowledge or consent. The House OIG reported their findings to the Speaker's office, Democratic leadership, and the House Administration Committee, as well as the House Sergeant-at-Arms and Capitol Police in late September and early October of 2016, and Capitol Police began a criminal investigation into Imran Awan and his associates at that time. Capitol Police determined that the image they required Imran to provide was falsified, likely with deliberate attempt to conceal the activities that they knew were against House policy and the law. These facts, standing alone, indicate a substantial security threat at the least, but the events don't end there. A laptop was recovered in a phone booth in the Rayburn office building after midnight on April 6, 2017. According to Capitol Police report, reviewing the bag recovered in that phone booth contained the following items. Number one, a Pakistani ID card with the name Muhammad Ashraf Awan. Number two, a copy, not the original, of a driver's license with the name Imran Awan. Number three, a copy, front and back, of his congressional ID. Number four, an Apple laptop with the home screen initials Rep. DWS. Number five, composition notebooks with the notes handwritten saying attorney-client privilege. That's in quotes, and possibly discussing case details below. Number six, loose letters addressed to the U.S. Attorney of D.C., the District of Columbia, discussing the apparent owner of the bag being investigated. The bag was recovered after Imran was banned from accessing the House IT network, but not before he was ultimately fired from Rep. Wasserman Schultz. Capitol Police banned Imran Awan and his associates from the House network on February 2nd, 2017. Just remember when the investigation started. Wasserman Schultz then fired Awan on July 25th after learning about his arrest, so 6 months later. Despite the threat of consequences to the police chief if a member equipment was not returned, the police continued their investigation of the computer. Representative Wasserman Schultz has hired an attorney to represent her interests in the matter. Now, I'm not a lawyer. I don't have any prosecutorial experience. I don't have any expertise in information technology, and I'm not going to claim any specialized investigative journalist skills, but I have been fortunate enough to be placed in front of individuals that do have particularized knowledge in these areas to ask questions that need to be answered. Gomer, this is for Luke, I think. As I stated in my opening statement, on April 6th of 2017 of this year, Capitol Police found an unattended laptop in the phone booth in Rayburn House Office Building. With the laptop was a Pakistani ID card, a copy of Mr. Awan's driver's license, a copy of his congressional ID staff badge, letters to the U.S. Attorney, and a notebook marked attorney-client privilege. It's my understanding that this information is part of the Capitol Police report. Is that correct, as you know it?
That's right.
All right. And you've seen the report?
Yes.
Okay. Is there additional evidence to show that Mr. Imran purposely left this laptop where he did?
No, there's not. We don't know what his intentions would be. His lawyers have said that he accidentally left it there, but it's a small room and it's a lot of seemingly pretty important and carefully curated equipment.
Right.
And to leave that and walk away, I mean, people can draw their own.
Does the House have surveillance tapes of the office buildings that you know of?
I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Now, a month later in May, Ms. Wasserman Schultz asked Capitol Police Chief Matthew Verderosa some pointed questions at Legislative Branch Appropriations Subcommittee hearing regarding a laptop. I've watched the footage. The representative seems pretty upset. She talks about consequences if the laptop is not returned. Based on your research and knowledge of the investigation, do you believe that the laptop in question belongs to Representative Wasserman Schultz, or is it the same one?
It is the same one in that here. So this is, as you said, it was found by the Capitol Police in April. The following month, she used an Appropriations Committee hearing to make those threats against the Capitol Police, saying in the hypothetical that it was a member's laptop and the member had lost it. In July, she offered a different story, saying that it was Imran's laptop and she had never seen it. But she was, she said, I believe it was purchased with her MRA, so it was a government property. Now, I was in court on Friday for the arraignment of the wife here, and Imran had a status hearing, and this was about bank fraud, but the lawyer stood up and said, we feel, quote, very strongly that we want to block the government from using the hard drive that was found in that backpack in the phone booth. So that appears to be, as well, the same computer at issue, which did have the username repDWS. So while Wasserman Schultz has invoked the constitutional privileges that the chairman spoke about, you also have invocation of attorney-client privilege from Imran Awan's side. And that's interesting because he hadn't been charged with any crimes at that time, but he appears to be saying, because there was that notebook that you mentioned that had scribbled inside the notebook something about attorney-client privilege, that therefore this laptop can't be used as evidence in any way.
So it's unclear at this point whose laptop it was, right? It had her initials on the screensaver, what have you. It's either one or the other, right? You would think it's either one person or the other.
Right.
Either way, why would he, assuming he left it, why would he do that? Mr. Fitton, do you know? I mean, you're an attorney. I'm not.
I'm not an attorney.
You're not? Okay. I thought you were. All right. Any idea why he would do that?
I'm not sure I want to speculate about that, but it was clear that whatever Wasserman Schultz believed was on that laptop, she certainly didn't want anyone to see.
Now, it's also, I think, this, and maybe you can confirm this for me, that while Representative Wasserman Schultz has hired a private attorney to negotiate with investigators for the release of this laptop in particular, whether it's hers or not, we don't know, and she agreed to allow a scan of the laptop, and you have a document, a copy of the document showing the image of the hard drive of this laptop was provided to Imran Awan. Is that correct? He got a copy of it?
Yeah, so prosecutors have it, and he had a copy that he got under discovery, but it remains to be litigated whether prosecutors are going to be allowed to use that laptop as part of an ongoing criminal case.
So Mr. Awan and his attorney have an image of the entire hard drive from the computer that somehow he either bought with taxpayer money on behalf of the Democrat conference or it belongs to Representative Wasserman Schultz, and he Mr. Awan has a copy of everything on that laptop right now.
Yes, and it's worth noting that I believe both Wasserman Schultz and Imram are in agreement that this is a government laptop, and of course he was banned in February from accessing the House network. So this is a fired employee who there was concern that he should not have access to government information, and yet he, as you say, was given this copy and has it right now.
Now, we don't know exactly where, I mean, the server information might be on this laptop, it might not be on this laptop, right? I mean, is it possible that the server information that I discussed in my opening statement of the 40 members of Congress that were taken or imaged or sent, you know, were transferred, could they be on this laptop?
I don't have any knowledge of whether he would have copied over the server onto the laptop, but Wasserman Schultz invoking speech and debate clause would suggest that there is legislative information on that laptop.
Including maybe not necessarily classified information, but certainly sensitive information.
Could be.
Not only of the Democratic caucus, but also of individual constituents, etc. Their information might be all throughout that, and now might be in Mr. Awan's hands.
Right.
You know, just a few points. We've seen this game with the Mrs. Clinton's emails and her false statements about whether they were classified or not.
Right.
And so we cannot take at face value there was no.
I understand, and I agree with you. Right. Yeah.
And when it comes to privileges, no one doubts that there may be implicated privileges here, the speech or debate clause or attorney-client, but there's no privilege that can't be waived. And
if you're now just considering, what's it going to take to get a special counsel? We know that former FBI Director James Comey misled the American people in the summer of 2016 when he called the Clinton investigation a matter, obviously an investigation. We know FBI Director Comey was drafting an exoneration letter before the investigation was complete. We know Loretta Lynch, one day before the Benghazi report came out, 5 days before Secretary Clinton was scheduled to be interviewed by the FBI, met with former President Bill Clinton on a tarmac in Phoenix. We know after that meeting, when she was corresponding with public relations people at the Justice Department, she was using the name Elizabeth Carlisle. You know, as I've said before, it seems to me if you're just talking golf and grandkids, you can probably use your real name. We know that Mr. Comey publicized the investigation, and we know he made the final decision on whether to prosecute or not. And then when he gets fired, he leaks a government document through a friend to the New York Times, and what was his goal? To create momentum for a special counsel, and of course it can't just be any special counsel, it's got to be Bob Mueller, his best friend, his predecessor, his mentor.
Of EO Technical in Washington testified that you ordered Tea Party cases to undergo a multi-tier review. He testified, and I quote, "She sent me email saying that when these cases need to go through multi-tier review and they will eventually have to go to Ms. Kindell and the Chief Counsel's office. Why did you order Tea Party cases to undergo a multi-tier review?"
On the advice of my counsel, I respectfully exercise my Fifth Amendment right and decline to answer that question.
Ms. Lerner, in June,
I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020 or even sooner. I give President Trump credit for motivating his core supporters brilliantly, but for every core supporter he has created a greater number of core opponents who are equally strongly motivated.
If now, because he's the nominee for the party, and he's entitled to briefings from the CIA, for example, I said publicly, give him fake briefings. Pretend you're briefing him. Don't tell him anything.
But as a Republican nominee, isn't he entitled to get those briefings?
Give him fake briefings.
What does that even mean?
It means they'll tell him stuff. He won't know the difference.
You're basically telling the intelligence community to lie to him.
No, I'm not going to lie to you, but I just don't have to tell you everything.
Some people see a dumpster fire and do nothing but watch the spectacle. Some are too scared to face the danger, or they think it will benefit them if they just let it keep on burning. Others shrug and say, oh, all this talk of a dumpster fire is just fake news. There is an inferno raging in Washington. But here in the land of 10,000 lakes, We know how to put out a fire.
I am Richard Pater, and I approve of this message.
A few years ago, ideas that we talked about were thought to be fringe ideas, radical ideas, extremist ideas. Those ideas are now mainstream.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless.
What's Uncle Tom but for white women who disappoint other white women?
One way you get rid of Trump is a crashing economy, so please bring on the recession.
When was the last time an actor assassinated the president?
I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
I happen to be a big fan of Justice Kennedy. We're good friends. We've had a lot to do together. I supported him rather strongly when he came up for his position, and I think he's been a great justice. So whoever replaces him better be pretty darn good, is all I can say.
My ideal, man or woman, is a cross between Socrates and Dirty Harry.
What I most liked about Justice Kennedy is he did not identify with any ideological bloc on the court, but rather was a justice who evaluated every case not ideologically, but based on its merits and adherence to the law and the Constitution.
The president should take the time that's necessary, and it will be more than a month or two, to nominate someone who is open-minded and fair, a jurist who has a track record in the mold of Justice Kennedy.
Is there any Trump nominee that you would support?
Look, I'd love to see someone in the Gorsuch mentality. I mean, he's proven to be a real driving force and has been real involved in the opinions that have been yielded. So look, I'd love to see another nominee of that ilk.
I want somebody whip smart. I want a lawyer's lawyer. I want the type of lawyer that people will look at and go, "No, that's a real lawyer." I don't want a hater.
It is important that we have individuals on that court who reflect the values and the ideals of who we are as a country, and who prioritize that all of us are equal under the law, and that fairness will be the highest goals. And Kennedy leaving opens up a position on the court. I have real concerns about this president's ability to fill that position with someone who would reflect the ideals of who we are as a country.
This is probably going to be a bare knuckle, down in the dirt, scratching, biting, ear pulling political fight.
So I'd like to welcome up Frank Clemente. Frank is the Executive Director and co-founder of Americans for Tax Fairness, a diverse campaign of national, state, and local organizations united in support of a tax system that works for all Americans. Prior to founding Americans for Tax Fairness, Mr. Clemente served as Issues Campaign Director at the Change to Win Labor Federation and Director of Public Citizens Congress Watch, a national consumer watchdog organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here today. I'm glad I didn't come between you and your lunch a few minutes ago. I feel lucky about that, I guess. I'm Americans for Tax Fairness, the coalition that represents more than 400 state and national organizations with a total of tens of millions of members. I want to address 3 points with you today about tax fairness, and next week I'll give you some more detailed written testimony. First, making our tax system fairer is critical to reversing income inequality. Wealthy people don't pay their fair share of taxes, and neither do many big corporations. A lot of the income of the wealthy is shielded from taxation through loopholes, or is more lightly taxed than the income of working people. That's why the 400 richest Americans paid a 23% tax rate in 2013. They had an income averaging $83 million each. A major reason for this inequity is that income derived from wealth, from capital gains and dividends is taxed at about half the rate as income from work. Because wealth is so concentrated, 80% of the benefits from this preferential tax treatment goes to the top 1%. The rich also benefit from the massive tax loopholes by some of our biggest corporations use. That's because ownership of those corporations through shareholding is so concentrated among the wealthy. My second point is this. Creating an economy that works for everyone requires a bold and progressive tax reform agenda that raises a lot more revenue. It's not enough to dream big. America needs to do big, like we did decades ago. That means raising several $1 trillion in new revenue over the next 10 years. It's needed to fix our roads, bridges, mass transit, and water systems. There should be no more Flint, Michigans. Quality preschool should be available to all 4-year-olds regardless of income. All working parents should have access to affordable child care. All of us want to make college more affordable. Some of us want to make tuition free at public universities. And major new investments are needed to create clean energy and find the next generation of medical cures. Instead of aggressively pursuing these initiatives in recent years, we've let our public services wither away under austerity budgets demanded by conservatives. Domestic discretionary spending, that's the portion of the budget that funds all the things I just talked about, was 5.1% of the economy back in 1980. By 2021, it is projected to be about half that, just 2.8% of our economy. Clearly, we must raise a lot more revenue. We need to start by taxing wealth like work. We need to create a surcharge above the top marginal tax rate for millionaires and billionaires. And most importantly, we need to make sure corporations pay their fair share of taxes. Real corporate tax reform means rejecting revenue-neutral reform. Instead, we need to a lot more revenue from corporations. They need to pay the $700 billion they owe on the $2.4 trillion that they have in profits stashed offshore. Most of that's in tax havens. And we also have to have a tax system that stops encouraging corporations to ship jobs and profits offshore. That means ending their ability to indefinitely delay paying U.S. taxes on overseas profits and making sure that offshore earnings are taxed at the same rate as domestic profits. I'll stop there.
Are there questions from committee members? Warren?
Thanks, Frank. I just want to ask a quick question on deferral, on the ability of corporations to shift their profits and sometimes their jobs offshore to avoid paying federal income taxes. We all know about the famous Uglin House in the Cayman Islands, 5-story office building with some 18,000 corporations. In your opinion, how big of an issue is deferral? Should it be ended? Should we have that in the policy platform that we're working on?
Deferral is the central issue in the tax reform debate right now, in my estimation, at least from a progressive side of things. What deferral is, it's in the law, and it allows U.S. corporations, the profits that they generate offshore, they do not have to pay taxes on those profits until they repatriate them as dividends to the corporation. What that means is we have $2.4 trillion in profits that they owe taxes on that has accumulated offshore. They owe $700 billion in taxes on those profits. They do not want to bring them back here because they don't want to pay the $700 billion they owe. What they're doing is they've got an army of lobbyists swarming Capitol Hill demanding that Congress pass legislation that would let them bring those profits back at a fraction of what they owe. $700 billion is how much was spent in the Recovery Act as a result of the Great Recession. We cannot let that money go without it being paid. They want to pay perhaps a 10% tax rate. It's pennies on the dollar. It raises a couple of $100 billion. This is the central fight. This is the tail that's wagging the dog of the corporate tax reform debate right now. A lot they demand lower corporate tax rates, but this debate is being pushed by giant multinational corporations. They want to bring those profits back for cheap. And we're talking not about hundreds of companies here. There are 10 companies that have 40% of this $2.4 trillion offshore. The lead is Apple. Apple has $200 billion. All the money we've spent on our iPhones and iPads and iMacs and whatever, it is much of it is offshore right now, where they're paying less than a 5% tax rate. Why are they paying so little? Because most of the money is stashed in tax havens. What are they waiting for? They're waiting for Congress to give them legislation so they can bring it back on sheet. So this is the central fight. This is the key place that we can get money out of corporate tax reform.
There is the frightening, evolving threat of nuclear proliferation and outlaw regimes. There's an aggressive challenge by Russia and China to the norms and rules of global order.
Everybody knows I had a conversation. Everybody knows that I had a conversation. There's no American in Washington that knows that. There's no one. And you know it too. So, you know. So I don't even know why you asked.
Why is it?
No, you do know it. You do know it.
No, I just read in the Times in May of...
I don't know what you read or heard of, and I don't know the circumstances. Maybe in May of 04 I hadn't had a conversation. I don't know, but it's well known that I had the conversation. Do you have a question on another issue?
Well, can I ask you when the conversation was?
No, because the issue is closed as far as I'm concerned. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it in America.
Can you describe the conversation?
Pardon me?
Can you describe the
No,
conversation?
of course not. I don't private conversations.
Okay, can I ask you...
Why should I? Then there's no such thing as a private conversation. Is there if you have a private conversation with someone and then come and tell you? I don't know that that's a private conversation. I think that's a conversation.
Can I ask you about your... why are you so angry?
Pardon me?
Never mind. Let me ask you this.
It's well known. Everybody knows. It's been well chronicled 1,000 times. But John Kerry asked if I would consider being his running mate. And I said, no, under no circumstances. That's all very well known.
Trump is treason! Trump is treason! Trump is treason! Trump is treason! Why are you talking about tax cuts when you should be talking about treason? Why is Congress talking about tax cuts when they should be talking about treason? This candidate conspired with the agents of the Russian government to steal an election. We should be talking about treason in Congress, not about tax cuts. Inflation from American states.
I can get a day with Marla Maples. This is my man, Mr. Donald Trump. And look.
Tickets. You own your own airline, don't you? You still own your own airline? Oh, they haven't taken that away from you yet, huh? No, good.